Understanding the Circulation of Capital. In 1885, Karl Marx's groundbreaking work Does Capital reached its second volume, compiled and edited by his close collaborator Friedrich Engels after Marx's death. Unlike the first volume, which focused largely on the production of capital and the dynamics of surplus value, Volume II dives into the lifeblood of capitalism itself, the circulation of capital. Here, Marx and Engels guide readers through the complex journey of money, commodities, and labor as they flow through the economy, demonstrating how these movements sustain the capitalist system. Why does this matter even today? Because the circulation of capital shapes the opportunities, risks, and inequalities of our world. Every transaction, from a factory's purchase of raw materials to the wage paid to a laborer, is part of a vast network of economic exchange. Marx meticulously dissects these processes, revealing the hidden logic that allows capital to grow, accumulate, and reproduce itself across society. Volume II isn't just a dry economic treatise. It is a suspenseful exploration of cause and effect, where every economic action triggers a chain of consequences. Engels' editing preserves Marx's analytical clarity while making the intricate web of capitalist circulation accessible to readers of diverse backgrounds. For anyone seeking to understand how money moves, how commodities and labor interconnect, and why economic crises occur, this volume is an indispensable guide. By reading this book, listeners will witness the machinery of capitalism in motion, its cycles, contradictions, and enduring relevance, through the lens of one of history's greatest thinkers. Chapter 1: The Circuit of Money Capital. To understand the heartbeat of capitalism, we must first trace the path of money itself. In Volume II of Does Capital, Karl Marx shifts our focus from production, the creation of value, to circulation, the movement of capital through the economy. Here, he doesn't just describe money as coins or bills. He presents it as a dynamic living force that shapes and drives human activity, labor, and the entire capitalist system. Marx invites us into a world where money is not a mere passive measure of wealth, but an active agent, capable of generating more of itself through a process he famously summarized as M. Money becomes commodity, which becomes more money. Imagine a factory owner named Clara. She begins with a sum of money, say $10,000, intending to invest in the production of furniture. That $10,000 is not stagnant. It is money capital, a form of wealth that seeks expansion. Clara uses her money to purchase raw materials like wood, nails, and varnish, as well as labor in the form of skilled carpenters. Here, money is converted into productive capital, the means to create goods. The raw materials and labor are combined in production to create a final product, chairs and tables ready for sale. These finished goods now take the form of commodity capital, holding within them not just the value of the inputs but an additional amount, surplus value. That is the essence of profit. Marx breaks this down into a formula that, at first glance, might seem abstract but is profoundly illuminating. MCM, money commodity more money. This simple formula represents the cycle of capital in motion. The initial sum of money, M, is used to purchase commodities, C, both labor and raw materials. These commodities are transformed through production into a new commodity, C, which is then sold for a greater sum of money, M. The difference between M and M is the surplus value, the increase in wealth generated by the exploitation of labor. Notice the subtle but critical point. Capital's purpose is not simply to consume commodities or enjoy their utility. It exists to grow itself. Money becomes a vehicle for expansion, a self-propelling cycle. Now, this cycle, as straightforward as it seems in Clara's workshop, is embedded within a network of economic interactions. Marx emphasizes that money capital doesn't operate in isolation. Every investment, every transaction, and every movement of commodities is part of a vast system of circulation. Consider the raw material suppliers. They received money from Clara in exchange for wood and nails, which they in turn used to pay their workers and purchase other materials. Each participant in the economy is both a node and a conduit for capital, creating a chain of exchanges that sustains the flow of money across society. Here, Marx begins to illuminate one of his most profound insights. Capital is social in nature. Even though an individual capitalist might see their operations as private, the circulation of money connects them to countless other actors, forming the invisible web of a capitalist economy. The circulation process also highlights the temporal dimension of capital. Money is not only moving through space, from buyer to seller, but also through time. Clara's initial investment doesn't immediately yield M. There is a lag. She must wait while production occurs, goods are transported, and sales are completed. This interval, the period during which capital is tied up in production and circulation, is a crucial consideration for capitalists. The longer the money remains inactive, the slower the expansion of wealth. Marx calls attention to this as a form of circulation time, which determines the efficiency of capital and, ultimately, the competitiveness of businesses within the market. But there's more. Money capital is both a means and an end. On one hand, it functions as a means of purchasing labor and materials, facilitating the production of commodities. On the other hand, its ultimate purpose is self-augmentation, the creation of surplus value. This dual role explains why capitalists are often obsessed with liquidity and turnover. The faster money can move through the circuit, from investment to production to sale and back to money, the greater the capacity to generate additional wealth. Marx presents circulation not just as a static exchange of goods, but as a dynamic, ongoing process, an engine that propels capitalism forward. Let's pause and reflect on another dimension Marx explores: the transformation of money into capital. Not all money functions as capital. A worker's paycheck or a merchant's personal savings might represent wealth, but does not inherently create surplus value. Capital is a special category of money, activated through a systematic engagement with production and the exploitation of labor. This distinction is critical, and Marx underscores it repeatedly, because it separates ordinary economic transactions from the logic of capital accumulation. The capitalist's money is never neutral. It is always invested with the goal of expansion. Make this more tangible, consider a real-world analogy. Picture a tech startup that raises $1 million from investors. That money is not meant for mere expenditure. It is converted into software development, marketing, salaries, and equipment. Each dollar moves through the circuit of production and service delivery, generating a product, a software platform that can be sold for more than the initial investment. The startup's revenue exceeds its expenses, creating surplus value. The cycle repeats as profits are reinvested into the company, fueling further innovation and growth. Marx's analysis allows us to see the universality of this pattern. From furniture workshops in 19th-century Europe to modern Silicon Valley tech giants, the principle remains the same. Marx also delves into the complexities of capital in motion, identifying three main forms. 1. Money capital, M. This is the initial sum, the starting point of the circuit. It is liquid, flexible, and ready to be invested. 2. Productive capital, P. When money is used to buy labor and materials, it becomes productive capital. This is where labor produces surplus value. 3. Commodity capital, C. After production, the output becomes commodity capital, containing both the value of the inputs and the newly created surplus value. The circulation of these forms is not linear or simplistic. There are interruptions, delays, and inefficiencies. For example, a sudden shortage of raw materials can halt production, freezing money capital in the process. A decline in consumer demand can trap commodities, preventing their conversion back into money. These interruptions illustrate that while the circuit of money capital seeks smooth and continuous expansion, reality is messy, contingent, and sometimes precarious. Another fascinating aspect Marx emphasizes is the dual role of labor within this circuit. Labor is both a commodity and a source of surplus value. The capitalist purchases labor power, which has an exchange value, essentially the wages required for the worker's subsistence. But labor is unique because it produces value beyond itself. This additional value, created during the working day, is the source of profit. In the M circuit, labor is where the transformation occurs. Without productive labor, money cannot expand. This insight underpins Marx's critique of capitalism. It relies on the extraction of surplus value from labor, which is the hidden engine of the money circuit. Marx doesn't stop at theoretical abstractions. He also explores practical implications. The pace and smoothness of money circulation affect the entire economy. Faster circulation reduces the amount of money tied up in production and inventory, increasing efficiency. Slower circulation can create bottlenecks, inventory backlogs, or even financial crises. In this sense, understanding the circuit of money capital is not just academic. It is crucial for both capitalists seeking profit and economists seeking to understand systemic risks. Consider the modern analogy of global supply chains. A smartphone company invests millions in components sourced from around the world. Each supplier, factory, and distributor is part of the larger circulation of capital. A delay in a single shipment, say microchips from Taiwan, can halt production, trap capital, and create ripple effects throughout the system. Marx anticipated this interconnectedness. The circulation of capital is social, complex, and prone to disruptions that are beyond any single capitalist's control. The chapter also emphasizes the inevitability of capital accumulation. The circuit is not static. Each completed cycle enables the capitalist to reinvest, expand, and repeat the process on a larger scale. Money does not sit idle. It seeks growth. This explains the relentless drive of capitalism. It is not a system that rests, but one that constantly pressures labor, markets, and resources to generate more wealth. The M cycle is the skeleton of this relentless motion, and understanding it allows us to see both the opportunities and contradictions inherent in capitalist society. Finally, Marx's discussion introduces a note of tension and suspense that resonates even today. While the circuit of money capital promises growth, it also carries risks. Market fluctuations, supply interruptions, and crises of overproduction are always lurking. Capitalists strive to maintain a seamless cycle, but external forces, from labor unrest to economic shocks, can disrupt it. This tension between the smooth logic of capital and the unpredictable reality of markets is a theme that runs throughout Volume II, and it prepares readers for the later chapters on the transformation of capital and the dynamics of economic crises. In summary, the first chapter of Does Capital, Volume II lays the foundation for understanding capitalism as a system in motion. Money is not static. It is living capital, seeking expansion. Labor is not merely work. It is the source of surplus value that fuels the cycle. Production and circulation are intertwined, and every capitalist operation exists within a social network of economic exchange. From Clara's furniture workshop to modern multinational corporations, the principles Marx outlines are universally applicable, revealing the invisible mechanics behind the wealth and instability of capitalist economies. As we conclude this chapter, we are left with a powerful insight. The circulation of money capital is both the engine and the Achilles heel of capitalism. It drives growth, innovation, and wealth accumulation, yet it is susceptible to delays, disruptions, and crises. By understanding the M circuit, the forms of capital, and the role of labor, we gain not just a theoretical framework but a lens through which to view the economic world around us. Complex, dynamic, and endlessly fascinating. Chapter 2. The Transformation of Commodity and Productive Capital. If Chapter 1 guided us through the lifeblood of money capital, Chapter 2 plunges us into the deeper machinery of the capitalist system, the transformation of commodities and productive capital. This is where Marx's analysis becomes both intricate and profoundly revealing. While money capital is the spark that sets the process in motion, it is productive capital, the labor, machinery, and raw materials, that transforms potential value into realized wealth. Understanding this transformation is crucial for grasping how capitalism not only reproduces itself, but also generates its inherent contradictions. At the heart of this chapter is a simple but powerful insight. Capital is never static. Once money is invested in production, it becomes something entirely different. Raw materials and labor, once purchased, are no longer just commodities. They are productive capital, designed to generate surplus value. Marx distinguishes between three forms in circulation, but here the focus shifts from money to the metamorphosis of capital through production and the subsequent journey of commodities. In other words, the capitalist is no longer simply exchanging money for goods. They are orchestrating a complex process of transformation. Let's take the example of a small textile factory. The owner begins with a sum of money, which is used to buy cotton, dyes, looms, and the labor of skilled weavers. At this stage, money has been transformed into productive capital. The cotton is no longer just raw material. It is a medium through which labor can create value. The weaver's labor is also transformed. They are no longer just individuals selling their time. They are active participants in producing commodities that will carry both the original value of their wages and the surplus value extracted from their labor. Through the act of production, these components of productive capital are combined into finished textiles, now representing commodity capital. Marx emphasizes that this transformation is not merely a mechanical process. It is socially mediated. Labor is the active agent that creates surplus value, while machines and materials are instruments in this process. In every capitalist enterprise, therefore, value is both produced and transferred. The raw materials carry existing value into the product, labor adds new value, and the product becomes a carrier of both. Understanding this dual role of production is essential. It explains why profits emerge, why labor is exploited, and why the system is both productive and unequal. Once production is complete, commodities must enter circulation. They must be sold to realize the value embedded within them. This is where Marx's focus expands from individual factories to the broader economy. A single enterprise cannot function in isolation. The transformation of productive capital into commodity capital is inseparable from the dynamics of the market. If demand is high, commodities are sold quickly, and capital is freed to begin the next cycle. If demand falters, products pile up, money is trapped, and the smooth flow of capital is interrupted. Here, Marx introduces the first hint of systemic vulnerability. The circulation of commodities is not guaranteed. Production and sale are intertwined, but neither can exist independently, and disruptions in one reverberate throughout the system. To make this concrete, imagine a scenario in which our textile factory produces thousands of shirts, anticipating seasonal demand. Suddenly, an economic slowdown reduces consumer spending. The shirts remain unsold, tying up both commodity capital and the initial investment. The owner's money is immobilized, workers may face reduced hours, and suppliers await payment. This is a real-world illustration of Marx's principle that production alone does not generate profit. It must be complemented by successful circulation. Surplus value is not automatically realized. It requires the transformation of commodities back into money. Another critical theme in this chapter is the interconversion of different forms of capital. Marx distinguishes between money capital, productive capital, and commodity capital. But in practice, these forms are fluid, constantly transforming into one another. Money becomes productive capital when invested in labor and materials. Productive capital becomes commodity capital when production is complete. Commodity capital becomes money capital again when goods are sold. Each transformation is not merely symbolic. It has real consequences for the pace of capital accumulation, the extraction of surplus value, and the stability of the economy. Marx also explores the temporal and spatial dimensions of this transformation. Production takes time, labor requires organization, and goods must be transported and marketed. Capital is thus tied up in various forms for different durations, a concept Marx calls circulation time. For instance, a factory producing automobiles may invest millions of dollars in components and labor, but until the cars are sold, that capital is frozen. Reducing circulation time accelerates profit realization, while delays create inefficiencies and risks. This temporal aspect is critical for understanding why businesses invest in logistics, supply chain management, and market research. It is all about optimizing the transformation of productive capital into realizable value. Now let's delve deeper into the role of labor in the transformation process, because here Marx's analysis becomes particularly illuminating. Labor is unique. It is the source of new value which exceeds the value of the wages paid. This surplus labor is the foundation of profit. When the textile weavers work, they produce more value than the cost of their subsistence. That extra value is appropriated by the capitalist, becoming surplus value embedded in the commodity. This exploitation is not incidental. It is systemic. Without surplus labor, there would be no accumulation of capital, no expansion, and no growth of wealth in the capitalist sense. But labor is also a commodity itself. Workers sell their labor power to the capitalist in exchange for wages. This dual character, labor as a commodity and as a source of surplus value, is central to Marx's argument. It highlights the inherent tension in the system. While capital depends on labor for its growth, it also treats labor as an expendable input. This contradiction underlies many social and economic struggles, from wage disputes to labor strikes, and it continues to shape our world today. Marx further emphasizes that the transformation process is socially mediated. Production does not happen in a vacuum. It occurs within a web of social relations, markets, and institutions. Factories interact with suppliers, consumers, and financial systems. The success of capital transformation depends on these networks. If a supplier cannot deliver materials on time, or if consumer demand collapses, the smooth conversion of productive capital into commodity capital is disrupted. Here, Marx foreshadows the concept of systemic risk, a principle that modern economists and policymakers grapple with in global supply chains, financial markets, and industrial planning. An essential feature of this chapter is the discussion of the circuit's efficiency and its barriers. Marx identifies several factors that can hinder the transformation of capital: delays in production, market saturation, transportation problems, or fluctuations in labor availability. Each factor affects the realization of surplus value. For example, overproduction, producing more than the market can absorb, can immobilize commodity capital, trapping money and reducing profitability. Marx's analysis here is strikingly relevant to contemporary crises, such as stockpiles of unsold goods, inventory gluts, or failed product launches. The lesson is timeless. Successful capital accumulation requires not just production, but production attuned to social demand. Marx also examines different types of productive capital: fixed and circulating. Fixed capital includes machinery, tools, and buildings. These assets are used over multiple production cycles and transfer their value gradually to commodities. Circulating capital, such as raw materials and wages, is fully consumed in a single cycle. Understanding this distinction clarifies why certain investments tie up capital for long periods while others move quickly through the circuit. It also explains strategic business decisions, why companies invest heavily in durable equipment but remain cautious with inventory purchases. As the chapter progresses, Marx addresses the social totality of production and circulation. While each capitalist focuses on their own operations, the economy functions as a web of interconnected transformations. Clara's textile factory is linked to cotton producers, dyers, transporters, retailers, and consumers. Each node in the network affects the others. Disruptions in one segment ripple through the system. This insight emphasizes that capitalism is not merely a collection of individual firms. It is an interconnected social and economic organism. A particularly compelling part of this chapter is Marx's discussion of economic crises arising from disrupted transformations. If commodities cannot be sold, or if labor is insufficiently productive, the entire circuit stalls. These interruptions can accumulate, leading to systemic crises. Overproduction, underconsumption, and bottlenecks are not anomalies. They are natural outcomes of the capitalist mode of production. Marx's analysis here is both cautionary and explanatory. The very mechanisms that generate wealth also create vulnerability. Finally, Marx concludes this chapter by reflecting on the dynamic, cyclical nature of capitalist transformation. Capital is not static. It moves, morphs, and expands through continuous cycles. Money becomes productive capital becomes commodity capital, and commodity capital becomes money again, ready to start a new cycle. Each cycle embeds the contradictions of capitalism: growth paired with instability, surplus value paired with labor exploitation, production paired with social dependency. Understanding this cycle allows both laypeople and experts to grasp the rhythm, logic, and risks of capitalist economies. In conclusion, Chapter 2 of Does Capital, Volume II illuminates the transformation of capital in its journey from money to productive labor to commodities ready for sale. Marx teaches us that production is not merely mechanical. It is a socially mediated process in which labor, materials, and machines interact to create new value. Circulation is essential to realize this value, and disruptions reveal capitalism's inherent vulnerabilities. The chapter leaves us with a profound appreciation of the complex choreography required to maintain capital accumulation, and a deeper understanding of the social and economic dynamics that underpin every business, factory, and market. By studying the transformation of productive and commodity capital, we gain insight into both the possibilities and perils of capitalism. We see why economies grow, why profits emerge, and why crises are inevitable. We recognize the dual role of labor as a creator of value and a commodity itself. And we understand that the journey from money to goods to money is not linear or guaranteed. It is a delicate dance of production, circulation, and social interaction, orchestrated on a grand scale. Chapter 3: The Circulation of Social Capital and Economic Crises. If Chapters 1 and 2 took us through the movement of money and the transformation of productive capital, Chapter 3 brings us to the grand stage: the circulation of social capital and the dynamics of economic crises. Here, Karl Marx steps back from individual factories and transactions to examine the broader system in which all capitalist activity is embedded. The focus shifts from isolated capitalists to society as a whole, revealing how the circulation of many interconnected capitals shapes the rhythm, stability, and vulnerability of the economy. At its core, this chapter explores a fundamental insight. Capital is inherently social. Individual capitalists, whether Clara in her textile factory or a multinational corporation, do not operate in isolation. Their capital circulates within a web of other capitals, each influencing the others. The success or failure of one enterprise can ripple through the economy, affecting suppliers, competitors, consumers, and workers. Marx describes this as the circulation of social capital, a networked system in which the fate of one capitalist is inseparable from the broader social totality. To illustrate, imagine a global automobile industry. One car manufacturer orders steel from a supplier, electronic components from another, tires from a third, and labor from numerous factories. Each participant depends on timely deliveries, steady demand, and efficient production elsewhere. If one supplier falters, say due to natural disasters, labor strikes, or raw material shortages, the disruption spreads like ripples in a pond. Factories halt production, workers are furloughed, inventories pile up, and profits shrink. This interconnectedness demonstrates Marx's point. Capital is not a collection of isolated units. It circulates socially, and disruptions in one part of the system affect the whole. Marx also emphasizes that the circulation of social capital is cyclical and dynamic. Individual capitals are continually transforming from money to productive capital to commodity capital and back to money, but these transformations are interdependent. Each cycle must be coordinated, either through markets or social mechanisms, to maintain the flow of the economy. Here lies both the genius and the vulnerability of capitalism. It is highly efficient under normal conditions, but prone to systemic crises when coordination fails. One of the most important contributions of Chapter 3 is Marx's analysis of economic crises as an inherent feature of capitalist circulation. Crises are not accidental or anomalies. They emerge naturally from the contradictions within the circulation process. For instance, overproduction occurs when too many commodities are produced relative to demand. Even if individual firms are profitable, the system as a whole can experience a surplus of goods that cannot be sold. Money capital is immobilized, productive capital is idled, and workers are unemployed. What appears as chaos is actually the logical outcome of the capitalist circuit in motion. To illustrate, consider a historical example: the economic crises of the late 19th century, when industrial overproduction in Europe led to falling prices, idle factories, and widespread unemployment. Individual entrepreneurs continued producing, seeking surplus value, but the social circulation of capital could not absorb the output. Marx uses such examples to show that profit-driven production, without regard to social needs, generates instability. Crises are built into the system, not merely external shocks. Another crucial concept in this chapter is the role of credit and financial mechanisms in social capital circulation. Money capital often does not exist in physical form. Instead, it circulates through credit, loans, and financial instruments. Banks and financial institutions accelerate the movement of capital by lending money to capitalists, facilitating production, and enabling the purchase of commodities. This increases the speed of circulation and the scale of accumulation. Yet it also introduces risk. If debts cannot be repaid, financial crises erupt, freezing the circulation of social capital and amplifying the impact of any disruption. Marx's insights here foreshadow modern economic phenomena such as credit bubbles, bank collapses, and systemic financial crises. Marx also delves into the temporal dimension of social capital circulation. The speed of capital turnover is critical for the stability of the system. Delays in production, distribution, or sales can accumulate, causing bottlenecks and interruptions. For example, if a steel manufacturer delays delivering materials, automobile factories slow down, affecting downstream workers and suppliers. In this way, circulation time is not only a technical concept, but also a social one, affecting livelihoods and economic stability on a large scale. One of the most compelling aspects of this chapter is Marx's exploration of the contradictions inherent in capitalist circulation. While individual capitals aim to maximize surplus value, the collective outcome is often unstable. Overproduction, underconsumption, and crises emerge as a natural tension between private interests and social outcomes. Capitalists compete to expand their own wealth, yet this competitive drive can destabilize the system as a whole. Here, Marx's analysis combines philosophical insight with practical observation. Capitalism is both creative and destructive, capable of generating extraordinary wealth and profound crises simultaneously. Marx further examines the role of labor in social capital circulation. Workers are not only producing surplus value for individual capitalists, but also sustaining the circulation of the entire system. Their wages allow them to purchase commodities, feeding demand and enabling the conversion of commodity capital back into money. When workers' purchasing power declines, due to unemployment, wage cuts, or market saturation, the circulation of social capital is disrupted. This creates a feedback loop. Reduced consumption slows the realization of surplus value, which in turn impacts production, employment, and social stability. Marx thus highlights the interdependence of capital and labor on a systemic level. Another important theme is the global dimension of social capital circulation. Even in Marx's time, capitalism was international. Commodities, labor, and capital crossed national borders. Today, this interconnection is exponentially greater, but the principle remains the same. Crises in one region can cascade globally because capital is socially and spatially networked. The 2008 global financial crisis, for example, was a modern illustration of Marx's principle. Failures in the U.S. housing market froze financial flows worldwide, affecting industries, banks, and workers across continents. Marx's insights provide a lens to understand the structural vulnerabilities of capitalism that transcend time and geography. Marx also introduces the concept of capitalist cycles, the recurrent booms and busts that define economic life. The circulation of social capital is not smooth or linear. It oscillates, influenced by innovation, competition, credit expansion, and market dynamics. During periods of expansion, profits soar, production accelerates, and markets flourish. Yet inevitably, contradictions accumulate: overproduction, excessive credit, labor disputes, culminating in crises. These cycles are systemic, reflecting the intrinsic rhythms of capitalist circulation rather than isolated accidents. What makes Marx's analysis compelling is his ability to weave abstract theory with tangible examples. Social capital circulation is not merely a theoretical construct. It manifests in factories, markets, financial institutions, and daily life. When Clara's textile factory produces more than it can sell, or when a supplier cannot meet demand, these local events reflect the larger social dynamics of capital. Marx invites readers to see beyond individual profits or losses and to understand the systemic nature of capitalist motion. Each transaction, each investment, each decision is a thread in the vast web of social capital circulation. The chapter also highlights the tension between growth and stability. Capitalist accumulation is relentless. The pursuit of surplus value drives continuous expansion, yet this growth is inherently uneven and precarious. Some sectors may flourish while others stagnate, leading to imbalances. Innovations can create new markets, but they can also displace workers, create redundancy, and generate crises in older sectors. Marx's framework allows us to understand this duality. Capitalism is dynamic, productive, and inventive, but also vulnerable, unequal, and cyclical. By the end of Chapter 3, Marx's central message becomes clear. The circulation of social capital is the pulse of the economy, and crises are its natural rhythms. Understanding this system is essential not only for economists and policymakers, but for anyone seeking to navigate modern capitalist societies. The movement of capital, through money, production, commodities, and labor, is both the engine of wealth creation and the source of systemic instability. Recognizing the patterns, contradictions, and vulnerabilities embedded in these processes provides insight into why economies expand and contract, why crises arise, and why social inequalities persist. In a modern context, Marx's analysis remains remarkably prescient. The interdependence of global supply chains, the reliance on credit and financial instruments, the centrality of labor in sustaining consumption, and the inevitability of economic cycles are all phenomena we see today. By studying the circulation of social capital, we gain tools not only for understanding past crises, but for anticipating and mitigating future disruptions. Marx's work provides a map of capitalist dynamics, revealing both the brilliance and the fragility of the system. Finally, Chapter 3 concludes with a reflection on the broader philosophical implications of Marx's insights. Capitalism is not merely an economic system. It is a social process that shapes human relationships, labor, and society itself. The circulation of social capital reveals how interconnected we are, how individual pursuits of wealth ripple through society, and how systemic risks emerge from ordinary economic activity. Marx's work challenges us to see beyond the surface of markets and profits, to recognize the hidden forces at play, and to contemplate the possibilities for a more stable and equitable economic order. In essence, the third chapter ties together the threads of Volume II. Money moves, productive capital transforms, commodities circulate, and social capital flows in complex interconnected patterns. Surplus value is generated, crises arise, and the system continues its dynamic, cyclical dance. Marx's insights illuminate both the power and the contradictions of capitalism, providing readers with a deep understanding of the structures that shape our economic lives and the forces that drive growth, instability, and change. Through this lens, the circulation of social capital is more than an economic concept. It is a story of society itself, a narrative of human labor, ingenuity, and vulnerability, intricately woven into the fabric of capitalist life. And it is precisely this narrative that Marx and Engels preserved in Volume II, offering readers a lens to understand the rhythms of wealth and the inevitability of crises, guiding us toward both comprehension and critical reflection.